I'm Kerry Rowett, and this is the Align and Attract podcast, helping you to create your version of an aligned business. Let's dive into today's episode. Aligning to the season of life you are in. Today, we're going to be looking at identifying the season of life you are in right now, finding out what your top priorities are in this particular season, and checking, do my actions align with my priorities in this particular season? Now, this episode has some links to a recent discussion I had with Amy Crawford on her new podcast, which is called Woman. It was episode 11, where we had a huge chat about identity. And so you might like to go and listen to that after you have finished listening to this episode. But there are times in our lives where we do go through quite a big change or a shift in our identity. And if we don't get really clear on what is the season we're in and make some changes to our priorities, or at least acknowledging what our priorities are, it can create a lot of confusion. It can create some inner conflict, and it can even lead you to feel like you're not succeeding or you are failing even in some way. And it may not even be true. It may just be that your priorities at this particular time are different to what they may have been in a different season of your life, where you may have perceived that you were more successful. So let's have a look at this. So first of all, identifying the season that you are in. So it could be that where you are in your life right now is really work focused, very work oriented. I have had times in my life like that where I could devote all the hours that I wanted to my work. And then I might have my self-care outside of that. But in some ways, my self-care was just to fuel my work. There are also phases where it's like you might be more focused on a new relationship that you are in, or if you've got young children, that can really define the season that you are in. You might be in a season where you're having to focus on your health. Maybe you're experiencing ill health or low energy, and that is actually your major priority. You might be in a very busy season of life, juggling all of the things. And you could also be in a very reflective phase and season of your life. And additionally, you could be affected by the actual season that you're in. Sometimes, for a lot of us, summer can be really quite outward, more social, more active. Winter can be more inward, more focused on being more around home. It can sometimes be less social. And so it's just, really important to think about that. If you're affected by COVID restrictions where you are in the world right now, or some other kind of restrictions, that can have an impact on your actual reality that you're living in right now. So have a think for you. How would I define the season that I'm in right now? So if I was to define my season, it is very oriented around my very young family. I have an 18-month-old and I have a 4-year-old. I am spending 2 days a week working, and then I, juggle everything in and around the kids outside of that. So my kids really are my major focus, but my work is still a really big priority for me, and of course my relationship as well. So that is how I would define my current season. I'd love to hear how you define yours. Number 2, once you've decided and identified this is the season I'm in right now, identify your top priorities in this season. And this is a big part of allowing yourself to feel success and to really claim this is where I am. So, for example, if we take me as an example, if I was to define my, for example, like business success by a time in my life when I was extremely work focused and had a lot of time and energy to devote to my work, I could feel some sense of failure. However, if I am to really be clear about the season of life that I'm in and that's more family focused, and I have the priority of my work as well, I can create a different definition of what success is. And then I can say, wow, like this is a really successful time for my business also, because I'm getting to do what I love and work with amazing clients and getting to look after my children and spend a lot of time with them whilst they're little. So let's have a think about what our priorities might be at this particular time. So, for you, if you think about the season of life that you are in right now, what would you define as your biggest priority right now? What is the most important thing? Now, don't feel any kind of pressure to name a priority that you think that you should have, or that sounds right, or that you think other people would have or would think that you should have. Really get clear for yourself, what is actually my biggest priority? When I did this, my biggest priority came out as my children, that they're happy and healthy. And I'll tell you, with that should thing, I was like, well, your biggest priority should still be yourself and your own health and your own energy and so on, because that's, whatever. But when I was honest, I'm like, well, no, actually, at this particular point, having the kids be happy and healthy is actually my highest priority. And that is, I'm just going to own that for myself. It's just for me. And when you're defining your priorities, it's just for you, right? Doesn't mean you don't have other priorities, but we're just really saying what is sitting at the top of my pyramid in my priority list right now, and then owning it. Number two, my second priority is looking after myself and looking after my energy and my well-being, my physical health, and so on. So I wonder, what is your second biggest priority right now? Have a think. How would you describe it? And number three, my third biggest priority is working with my beautiful clients and also my participants in Align and Attract. So you can hear that for me, there is a work priority still there in my top three priorities. In the past, it might have been priority 1, 2, and 3 might have all been work, or maybe there would have been like a personal priority as number 3, and that's sort of flipped for this particular point in my life. So for yourself, have a think, what would be my third biggest priority right now in this season of my life? What's really important to me when I get super honest with myself? It might be really helpful to write these down as well, so you have them as a reference point. Because when we're identifying these priorities, we're saying these are really my measures of success at the moment. So, for example, for me, if I had a successful business in some sort of metric that was seemed really significant for me, and yet my kids were, really not happy, or they were missing out in some way, like that wouldn't actually feel like success for me at this particular point. Or equally, if I was really prioritizing the business, but I wasn't really looking after myself, and then I was becoming increasingly depleted and burnt out, that would not feel like success for me at this point in time. So that's why it's just so important, I think, to get that clarity so that you can really say, hey, this is what success looks like for me right now. It's very easy to become influenced by, people that you might follow, people you might speak to, even mentors and things like that. Hey, they might be in a different season of their life. They may have different priorities to you right now. This is, having this clarity on your priorities is what's going to make you have that clarity on what's important to you, and it's what's going to make you happy ultimately, right? Number 3, check, do my actions align with my priorities? This is so important. Sometimes we can think something is a priority, but then we look at our actions and it just does not add up. It does not make sense because there's not the evidence in the external world that that is actually our priority. So pay attention. When I asked myself this question, do my actions align with my priorities? I'm going to tell you what came out because it was so interesting for me. And it was like, where am I spending a lot of my work time? And I am spending a fair bit of my work time creating content and doing stuff on social media. And the content includes stuff for the podcast. And I really love creating content. It's so fun for me. It's so creative. Even doing stuff for social media, I find can be really fun. But when I look at my priorities, I think, well, that actually is taking a fair amount of time. And if I was doing a little bit less of that, I would have a little bit more time for working with my clients, which is actually a much higher priority for me. So I feel like I need to do a little bit of a rejig around that. So I wonder if you can do the same thing that I just did and find an action that is a little bit out of alignment with your priorities. It's like, I feel I'm saying I value these 3 things as my highest priorities, and yet this action, it's like I'm either not putting enough energy into one of these, or I'm putting too much energy into something else that actually is not aligned with these particular priorities. And you know what this makes me think about with my social media, like action. It makes me think about my interview with Leonie Dawson. Did you already listen to it? If you didn't, go and check it out on the podcast. And, Leonie looked at the amount of time and money and energy she was putting into social media in relation to the impact it was actually having on her business. And she made the call, I'm going to get rid of social media altogether. It is actually not worth it. I'm certainly not saying I'm in that particular place myself, but that's a really bold move from someone who's made millions of dollars to say, yeah, look, everyone, inverted commas, says you need to be on social media. But hey, I've actually looked at the stats. I've looked at, the time and the energy and the money this is taking, and I've made a completely different choice, which is in alignment with my own priorities. So that was a really super bold move that Leonie made to realign to her priorities. So let's go back through those 3 again in relation to aligning this to the season of life that you're in right now. Number 1, identify the season that you are actually in right now. Number 2, identify your top priorities in this season and own them. Like, just be excited about the season of life that you're in. And if you can't be excited about it, like, just recognize it. This is what's true for me. This is the reality for me. And number 3, check, do my actions align with my priorities? I would love to hear any light bulb moments that you've had, any new decisions that you have made. Jump over to Kerry Rowett on Instagram and let me know. And if you do a post about it, then tag me as well. I would love to hear. Thanks so much, and I will see you next time. You can find all of the relevant show notes for this episode over at alignandattract.com/blog/18. If you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on your podcast app, and please share the episode with a friend. I can't wait to see you next time.